A basketball hero around here is treated like a god. I mean, how can you ever find out what he could really do? I don't want this to be the high point of his life. I've seen them, the real sad ones. They sit around the rest of their lives talking about the glory days when they were 17 years old.
You know, most people would kill to be treated like a god just for a few moments.
All the time I was in Cottersville, so know him and his family well.
Yes, very nice guy, and what a career! I mean, if you took a ruler and a pencil and drew wherever he went, it's amazing.
Yeah, he did a lot with girls basketball after he got out of college. Really, he had probably almost as long a career in women's college basketball as he did in men's. So, big career.
Okay, so you ready?
Ready to go.
All right, give me a second here, and I'll cue you in. Welcome to Keeping the Nostalgia Alive, the Indiana Basketball Memory Show. I am your host, Billy Powell. You can listen to these interviews that we do at Keeping the Nostalgia Alive. That's all one word, keepingthenostalgiaalive.podbean. That's Podbean, PODBEAN.com. Keeping the Nostalgia Alive at podbean.com. Our next guest, I would take most of the interview time up by telling you what he's done, accomplished, and all the accolades. Without further ado, Indiana Basketball Hall of Fame member, coach, two-time state championship. I mean, it goes on and on. I can't do it. I'll put it all in the introduction of the show. Is Coach Basil Mawbey. Coach Mawbey, thank you so much for spending some time with us and sharing your story of the game in basketball and keeping the nostalgia alive.
Well, we really enjoy listening to your broadcast. So I'm proud to be part of this, and so thankful that you gave me a call.
You know, little did I know back in 1983 at the semi-state there at Hinkle Fieldhouse, seeing you coach the Connersville Spartans, little did I know that, and I love that, you know, so many years later that I get the opportunity to hear your story and stories about coaching in Indiana high school basketball. It's fantastic.
Oh, that was a special place. Hinkle Fieldhouse growing up. I can remember my first state tournament. I was probably on about on the east side, really high, and 19, I believe, in 68 or 9. And so I saw a lot of state tournaments and some great games there, and very, very proud of one moment in the 83 team. We were practiced at Market Square on Thursday. Then we came back Friday for the Kiwanis banquet with the team, and instead of going back home, we stayed in Indy and practiced at Hinkle that day. And nobody's in the gym. It's all cleared out. And all of a sudden, I look over and sitting on the bleachers right as you come in from the north end was Coach Hinkle. And what a thrill to see him watching our practice. And so I introduced my players to him, and I don't think they knew what they were really seeing right there. But what a legend and what a great thrill coaching and playing in front of Coach Hinkle at his legendary gymnasium.
You know, it's interesting. I wasn't a very good basketball player, but being brought up between 82 and 86 and watching Coach Smith coach the game, and, of course, we traveled everywhere in the state, I soaked it in like a sponge. So, not great at the game of basketball, but I took a lot of stuff in, and I really enjoy what I'm doing. And once again, I thank you for spending some time with us.
Well, at Hinkle, what really I can think of really one of the most different than any other gym. You had this big hallway you went down underneath the gym to dress, and coming up those stairs, or not stairs, up the ramp was a great thrill to entering into that game in 1983 against First Indian Creek, and then the great game against Newcastle.
Coach, tell us all a little bit about where you were born and raised and who introduced you to the game of basketball, if you remember.
Well, I grew up in rural North Miami County. I went to Deesville High School, and I was an only child. So my mother was a school teacher. My father worked on the railroad, and we farmed. Well, I had no one to really play with other than myself and that basketball and against the shed. So that's how I really grew up with basketball, was me and my ball, because there were nobody lived close to me. My cousin may have lived a mile away, but nobody close. So basketball and me started out right then. One of the funny things I was remembering today when I was thinking about this show was when I first went to school, in probably 6th or 7th grade. First day of school, you're all excited about school, and I'm outside in the recess period outside the gym, outside the school, and the new basketball coach just walked by, and I stopped him and I said, "Coach Dormeyer, when will we start practice? Here I am, a 6th or 7th grader, and I'm wondering when this varsity coach is going to start me at practicing basketball with my 6th grade team." But it was very different back then. Basketball was really a big, big part of our social and athletic life at Deedsville High School.
Before getting to Deedsville High School, what was the state of high school basketball in Indiana? What do you remember about it, or were you just ready to get to high school and go on?
Well, I think the biggest thrill was the county and sectional tournament. That was a week-long event. I think we probably had maybe 10 or 12 teams in the county tournament and 10 or 12 teams in the sectional. So it was an all-week affair. You'd get out of school on Friday. I believe we played in the afternoon, probably Thursday night or Wednesday night, and it was all day and all night. Then on Saturday, the big thrill was you got to go to the afternoon game, and then in between games, here we are as junior high and freshman or so, we get to go to a movie between and then go back for the night game. So it was all big event when we went to the sectional and county tournaments.
What kind of history did Deedsville have before you got there in the game of basketball?
Well, we're kind of proud of Deedsville High School, really. Peru dominated the sectional. They were probably near 1,000, and all the county schools are in the hundreds, or 100 to 150, maybe 75. And so in 1926, Deedsville won the sectional tournament. And all the way up until when all the county schools consolidated, Deedsville was the only team that won the sectional championship. So, here I am in 1950s and 60s. We thought we would be the second team to win it, but only one team won out of all the schools that feed into North Miami, Deedsville in 1926. So we're proud of that, but obviously I never got to see the games, but I heard all about it.
What kind of basketball player were you in high school?
Well, I enjoyed it. That's because I practiced about all the time because that was my only thing to do, and so I'd shoot a lot of baskets. So, and my sophomore year, I played varsity some and played JV, and was also in the band. And back then, at halftime or between the games, you'd have the band come out and play. Well, I had to leave the junior varsity game as a sophomore and go dress for the band and missed the fourth quarter. So the next day I quit band, and I was full-time basketball from then. But my junior year I was fortunate to lead a area scoring average, and junior year we had a good team, and I again was one of the leading scorers. I thought I was pretty good until I got to Ball State, and I found out there was a much difference between Deedsville High School and playing at Ball State University.
And what were your choices in going to college? Was Ball State always on your mind because of it producing teachers? Did you want to teach? Did you earlier while you were at high school, did you think maybe this is something I want to do, is spend my life with the game of basketball?
Well, I think I really wanted to coach, and also I thought it could make Ball State's team. Here it is. At that time. Indiana and Purdue I knew about, but Ball State was smaller, and I think it only had about 7,000 students at that time. Manchester College is where my mother went, and then she taught for 30 or 40 years. So I imagine I considered that. Purdue, but I thought, maybe they're too big. I may not make the team. Well, I was not nearly good enough to make Ball State's team either. But from that, I got into coaching at a fraternity level, and coached the bike team, the basketball team, softball, and I loved to do that. And from then on, coaching was the career that I wanted to follow.
And how did at work in that time? I mean, once you've gotten your degree at Ball State, I mean, what's that like as a young coach, getting out and finding a place to coach?
Well, right then, it was a little bit harder to get a varsity job right out of college, because a lot of the years before that, a lot of coaches were first year out of college. They may get a small high school, but by then, all of the schools had consolidated. 1965 was my first year out of college. And so, I was freshman coach at Caston, right near my home. And so I was freshman coach there for 2 years, and then 3 years at McConaughey. I was junior varsity coach. And at McConaughey, I started thinking, well, I'd like to be a varsity coach. So I started sending out applications to many, many places. And then my next year, I was at Logansport as freshman coach. And from there, I was fortunate to be interviewed and hired at West Washington High School and near Salem, Indiana. And that was my first varsity job in 1971.
As a young coach, and I asked a previous guest this today, are you looking for opportunities, or do opportunities find you as you ascended in your coaching?
Well, I think most coaches in that time were wanting to move up, into a high school that hosted a sectional. Obviously, your chances of winning a tournament was much greater in a larger school. So, a lot of coaches were step, and I was very fortunate from that. At West Washington, we won the county tournament my second year. Then I went to Delta High School, and we won the conference championship. But we kind of ran into a buzzsaw then. Muncie North was outstanding at that time with Sam Drummer and a really great group of players. And so we were runner-up in the county and sectional. Went to Angola, and finally, after 40 years of loving basketball, we finally won our first sectional championship in 1978 at Angola. And really, that was my goal, to win a sectional championship, because none of my high schools that I played for, none of them I coached at, all the way up through till Angola in 1978. And, this was my 15th year of coaching and 4 years of playing and 6 years of being a fan, probably. First sectional championship. So 78 was a very special year, even though you've probably read about that was the year that we had an energy crisis back then, and our sectional was played in the afternoon rather than the evening because of saving energy by not running the lights so long. So we won the sectional championship in the afternoon and went back to Angola, and our ride on the fire engine was in the daytime rather than the night, which is a little bit unusual. Probably one of the only times that ever happened in Indiana, having a sectional tournament in the afternoon.
You mentioned Sam Drummer. What a very underrated player when you talk about some of the great high school players from the state of Indiana.
Well, I would have to say in my coaching career, that's been a long time, probably 74, but he may have been the greatest I ever coached again. I saw a picture of him on Facebook this last week, and his jump shot, I would think he might have jumped 30, 34 inches in a jump shot. Straight up, beautiful release. I had no way that I didn't believe that he would be the next Oscar Robertson or be a 15-year NBA player. But didn't happen. Things didn't happen the way it should have maybe, but he was a great high school player.
And leaving Angola, was that hard?
Yeah, it was a great place to coach. I had great kids. We won 21 games in 78 when we won the sectional. Then the next year, we were really had an outstanding team again, but DeKalb at that time was undefeated, and they beat us in the sectional championship. But because of winning that sectional, I was able to interview at the bigger schools, and I interviewed at Brownsburg and was offered that position, which they hosted their own sectional. And right before I took that job, I got a call from Connersville. And I'm thinking, Connersville, boy, that's really a basketball powerhouse since they had won the state in '72. So I was excited to apply there, and I got the job in 1980 at Connersville, and that was the start of a great run of championships.
You know, when you've moved to Connersville, took that job, or even some of the previous jobs that you had before Connersville, was it anything like the movie Hoosiers, where the town or the coaches or the coaches' parents want to kind of get a feel for what Basil ball was all about?
Well, I think so. You know, we were very fortunate when we were at West Washington, my first job, and we were 0-6 at Christmas, and we won the county tournament. Won 2 games after being 0-6, and beat North Harrison. I believe it was 11-4 at that time. We beat them in the county tournament. And people were wondering, who is this young coach? And then on to Delta and on to Angola, and it was everybody was interested in basketball. I think we filled the gymnasiums most of the time, and it was a great thrill. But going to Connersville was something completely different, and that didn't start out very well, though. I go there, and I'm excited, Connersville, and the first game of the year at Connersville is always a big rival game against Union County. They always came to Connersville to play because we were the sectional site, and they wanted to get a game on the court, and so they always came. And my first game against Union County, here we are, the big 1,800 students, and they've got maybe 400, and they beat us in overtime. And I'm thinking, not a good way to start your career at Connersville. But the next 2 nights later, we go to Columbus High School and coach against Coach Stearman, probably one of the finest coaching gentlemen I've ever known. And we won that game, and we were on our way. And, that was really a great year. And you may have been at the game when we lost in the semi-state to Broad Ripple. And, I've told many people, if you start getting arguments about the greatest high school team ever, Broad Ripple could have beaten probably nearly every team in certain nights. They had a great center in Jeff Robinson, a great point guard, King Duke, Stacy Turan, great shooter in the corner, I believe Robinson maybe. What a great team. And they went ahead and won the state on Stacy Turan hitting that 50-footer, I guess, against Marion. But that was kind of the way we started out, Connersville. A great year, won the regional, and go on to the semi-state or beat by the state champion.
Coach, once you got to Connersville, take us from the coach's perspective of what kind of game plan or team plan do you have, or what does it take to build your team to, play Broad Ripple in that semi-state game to get to that? I mean, what kind of planning and what kind of team exercises or whatever you may want to call it do you have to lay down before you start a basketball team?
Well, I think at Connersville, having your own sectional and your own regional, you were kind of expected to get to the semi-state. Nobody in our regional was very large. I think nobody was over 1,000 students in our regional. So Connersville kind of dominated that regional. We were very fortunate. In my first 5 years, I guess, we won 4 regionals, and we're in the semi-state. And so your kids kind of knew that, hey, we're preparing to win the state championship. And everybody at Connersville really thought we would win the state. I mean, this wasn't, well, maybe you can do it. No, Connersville, you're going to win the state again. You've got this good group of young kids, and we really planned for that. My first year there, I was blessed to have 4 seniors, and I only had 1 junior starter. And the next year, he transferred, so we start 1981 with no returning starters, but we still go to the semi-state, I believe, and maybe got beat by Cathedral, and so another state power. So you were expected to be there. I did find out one thing after getting beat by Union County, and we went to Columbus. We played a 2-3 zone, and we full court press. And we won. So I thought, well, that sounds like a pretty good idea. So for the next 25 years, we played a 2-3 zone, and we pressed, and were able to win numerous championships. And maybe that victory at Columbus was the start of that. But if I can remember correctly, that was our first probably time to play a 2-3 zone and press 1-2-2, and nearly every possession from then on, that was our defense all the way up until maybe even in Kokomo in the 90s and 2000.
When the 1983 season, when the Connersville Spartans go on and win the state championship, did you know you had something special at the beginning of the year?
Well, we thought we would be very good. We'd been in the semi-state the year before, and Cathedral was outstanding. They had Barlow and Hicks and Shelton Smith. They were an outstanding team, Daniels. And we got beat by 9 points. And we played with them very equal most of the game, but they were just much stronger physically. And so when we got out of that game and we went in the locker room, I think the kids, what do we need to do to get here and win the semi-state? And we really went into a vigorous weight training program. We did weights, nearly all the kids really got on the weights, and the Heineman twins went from maybe benching 130 and 50, maybe to benching 190 and 200 in that one summer, increasing their strength. We also got on a program of box jumping. That was kind of the big exercise craze at that time, and our kids would jump boxes up and down the stairs because our goal was to get to the semi-state and not lose, but to go on to the Final Four. So we were planning on that from the very first day on. And even when I went for the interview at Connersville, and I took a T-shirt along and had state champion written on it that I had printed because I knew that's what they expected, and that's what my goal was going to be.
You know, I'm going to go off the path here a second, but what are your thoughts on, you play with what you're dealt. What were your thoughts on having to play a team like Cathedral that got to go out and pick their cards rather than play with what they were dealt?
Well, that's part of it. I interviewed for the Cathedral job, I think maybe either right after the state champion or something, and I asked them, what will be my teaching job? And they said, well, you will probably not be a teacher as much as you will be a public relations officer for the high school and recruit basketball players. So, that was expected because Cathedral has no feeder program going into them. And so you have to find your players. And it's a great school, and nothing wrong with going to Cathedral because it's a great institution. But there is no diocese, I don't believe, that feeds directly into Cathedral. And so it was your job to go to the 7th and 8th grade games and find the good players and show them what a good education at Cathedral could be, and also being part of a great basketball program.
Before getting to the Final Four in '83, were you kind of glad that we took so much energy out of Steve Alford and the Newcastle Trojans? Did you think that helped you any at all?
Oh, I think you just really got him warmed up for us, really. He only had 57 in the afternoon. He was probably going to go for 60 that night. And, hey, you don't ever know what's going to happen. We were very fortunate in Steve's freshman year, his sophomore year, and his junior year. We had defeated them all 3 years at Connersville. So we were anticipating beating Newcastle. We had never lost to them my 3 years that I'd been at Connersville. And we knew they were a great team, and we scouted them intensely. We probably saw tapes saw them in person many games. So we knew exactly who the players were, what we had to do. And, kids had a great start as a game. And because of that, we were able to spread the court. And when we spread the court, then we were able to dominate on the drive. And ended up winning the game pretty convincingly. And I know, obviously, they did have a tough game in the afternoon, but that's the way basketball was back then. In the regional, semi-state, and state, you had to play 2 games. And that hour difference may have made a difference, but there are many teams that went on and won playing the second game of the afternoon and still winning the evening game. So it was maybe a factor, but the biggest factor was we had great confidence. And Steve and Sam, quite great coaches and players, but we'd beaten them. And we thought we could do it, and I think it was 70-57. So we had a great basketball game and proved that we were capable of going on and got to go to the Final Four.
You beat Newcastle and you're going to the Final Four, and you've got to be so excited as a coach, and you just take it in for as little as you can. How do you prepare your team and keep your players from getting the big hit or from getting a little bit overexcited? How do you calm them down and bring your team into the Final Four that following weekend?
Well, I think we had maybe we didn't think it was good at the time, but we had lost 2 games during the year. We had lost at Seymour and at Franklin. So our kids knew it was not something that you could take for granted. We might have been the favorite in the afternoon game against Princeton, but Princeton had a great team. Jim Jones, one of the real premier coaches in Indiana basketball. They had 2 really outstanding players. Fitchner was about 6'8", I believe, and another forward about 6'5". So they were really an excellent team. And we were very, very fortunate to go ahead and prepare and go into that game. And we played very well in the afternoon game, and we're able to then watch Marion and Anderson go head-to-head with James Blackman and Troy Lewis going head-to-head with both of them, I think, near 50 points. And so we were ready for them, and then came the big one against the Anderson Indians.
Did you what goes through a coach's mind, especially when you're on a run like you are with your first state championship? Is there any doubt in your mind? How do you get rid of that doubt? And did you just feel like you guys were just destined to win that 1983 state championship?
Well, if you know me, every game I was very apprehensive. I tried to think of everything that could go wrong and tried to have a solution for that happening. So, no, we were not overconfident, and we did not know that it was going to be easy. But we did think that we are a great team. We played well together, come out, play the way we've played all year, and hopefully the chips fall in our favor because Anderson was a great team. Troy Lewis was one of the better high school players Indiana ever had. Norm Held, one of the best coaches. So it was a great, great challenge for us, and we went into the game knowing it's probably going to be a very close game, and it was right down to the last second.
Was it all a whirlwind on that first state championship, or do you remember the clock says 0 seconds and you're state champions? I mean, what goes through your mind?
Coach Held, we went ahead 1 point with about a minute to go, and Coach Held called time, and he decides to go for this last shot of the game, which is unusual with a minute to go. But he had Troy Lewis, and he says he thought, hey, we'll have Troy shoot it, and we'll rebound it, and let's let it fall as it falls. So they hold the ball for about 30 seconds, and they call timeout. And I can remember distinctly saying to the guys as we left the huddle, I said, 1 rebound, and you're state champions, guys. So that was our plan. We got to play good defense and then get that rebound. So as they held it, everybody said, well, Troy Lewis was going to shoot it. Well, yeah, we probably thought he was, but we didn't box and want him or anything special. We played 2-3 zone and guarded him, and they reversed it. With about 10 seconds to go, he drives to the left and stopped at the free throw line, and we obviously don't want to foul him because he's an 80 or 90% free throw shooter. And he jumps up and shoots it, and 9 out of 10, he probably makes that shot, but it goes off to the right side, and here's their center, 6'6". Forget his name, but he was ready to tip it in, and Mike Heineman comes from the left side across, deflects the ball. Flanagan gets the ball, and all of a sudden that buzzer goes off. And my first thought was, I turned to my wife. She's sitting in the stands, and I turned to her and I said, "Can you believe that? Here we are, state champions. Deedsville to a state championship. Never thought it. We wanted to win a sectional. We weren't planning on winning states. We were planning on winning sectionals. And from that moment on, then our goal was to get back to that championship, state championship, and do it again. And that was my goal for the next 30 years of coaching, as it was this year. That was my goal, to get to the state championship again, because there is no greater thrill in Indiana, I don't believe, than climbing the ladder, cutting the nets as a state champion of Indiana basketball.
What happened in the postseason after the state championship as a state championship coach? Do other are people calling you and wanting you to coach? How do you make a statement? Look, I'm staying here, or how does a basketball coach who's had success and wins a state championship, how does he handle his career from that first state championship?
Well, in '82, I don't know if that's the year Cathedral contacted me or not, but I also interviewed at North Central that year. I thought, boy, North Central, biggest school in the state, good basketball programs, interview. So I interview at North Central, and it's kind of a funny interview. They had like maybe 8 tables and 8 coaches there, and we rotated from table to table for about a 10-minute question and answer. They had some fans, some parents, administrators, teachers. And I remember one coach or one person asking me, why are you applying for the North Central job? And I said, well, it's a tough decision, because I said, I really think at Connersville we have a chance to win the state championship this year. And he kind of giggled, kind of laughed under his breath, like, well, that's a good statement to say in an interview, but you really think you're going to win the state? Well, so happens after the state, they invited the team or coaches to the 500-mile track for qualifications. So I'm there and I'm walking along, and this guy comes up to me and he says, "Are you Coach Mawbey?" And I said, "Yes." He says, "Hey," he said, "I interviewed you at North Central, and you said you were going to win the state championship." And I kind of laughed. I said, "I remember that," but we did get the last laugh and won that. So we knew Connersville was a great job, and we left Connersville for one and only one primary reason, was our family lived in Miami County, about 15 miles from Kokomo, and we were happy at Connersville. We had great kids. It was a great feeder program. I had a great job, and the only reason we left Connersville was that we thought being close to our family was important, and Kokomo basketball was also a great program. So in '84, we thought we had a great chance. We had Flanagan and Crabtree back, 2 of our primary players in the state championship team, but we ended up getting beat in the regional that year. Then we go to the semi-state and get beat by, I believe, maybe Jeff George, maybe. So we won another semi-state, or another regional, went to semi-state, but didn't make the Final Four again. But my goal was then, when we went to Kokomo, let's get that second state championship for Kokomo, because they had won in '61, and we went there in '86, and so they were hungry for another state championship also.
Coach, during all of your career, how did you handle the media? Did you like talking to the media? Did you, tell us a little bit about what that did to a high school basketball team or a high school basketball coach. How did you deal with it?
Well, we were fortunate. We had a coach's show in Connersville, and then when I went to Kokomo, David and Dennis Casey, 2 twins. That one was a sports writer for the Tribune, and the other one was a TV executive. And so they started a television show about Kokomo basketball. So I was fortunate. I got to promote my team, my players, my coaches every week on TV statewide. It was WHMB out of Indianapolis, and so we had the Basil Mawbey show for 14 years, and enjoyed, being a part of it, but also being able to show my kids around the state on TV every week. So that was fun. We had a great radio broadcaster then, and Greg Bell. I never in all my career of listening to him ever heard him say a remark about a coach or a player in a derogatory manner. He would maybe say, maybe they could have done this or that, but never questioning their giving 100%. So that was super working for him. Dave Kitchell, the editor of the newspaper, great friend. We had great following, and the press was good to us. I think obviously when you're winning, they're much better than they are when you're losing. So we were very fortunate to have a good run of winning seasons, and the press was good to us.
What's the difference between the hotbed of Connorsville and their passion for the game and the passion for the game in Kokomo?
Well, not a lot of difference right then. They were had been split, the high schools, back in I believe in 1964, 1968 or 9. They had split the high school Kokomo into Hayworth and Kokomo. So they had not won a state championship, and everybody thought, well, the reason is we had two high schools, and both schools were probably nearly 1,500 to 2,000, whereas if they would have had one high school, 4,000, there were many teams that were really outstanding for both Hayworth and Kokomo. So people were thinking we would have probably won another state championship. So in 1986, the Kokomo school system decided to go back to one high school. So in 1985 or 6, I guess it was their first time being back as Kokomo High. And Carl McNulty, the great legendary coach, was there. And first year they were back together, they go to the semi-state. And one of the tough things about Kokomo, probably for the last 20 years before that, they never hosted a regional. They used to host the regional, and then I believe in the 70s, they started going to Anderson. And, Anderson had great basketball teams, and they never got to the semi-state again until 1985, I believe. And so the 14 years I was at Kokomo, we only hosted one regional, and that was 98, the year that we went to class basketball. And instead of having regionals at 4 or 5 different sites, then you had it at one home team, had a regional. So I was there for 11 years and coached all of my regionals at either Anderson or Newcastle, or Anderson or Marion, 2 really tough regionals. And so it was very tough for Kokomo to get out of the regional into that semi-state.
I can just see you like Norman Dale in the movie Hoosiers when you get to Kokomo. Well, let me see what I've been dealt, and what was that like?
Well, when I grew up in Miami County, up at Deansville, I can remember. Can't tell you the year, can't tell you everything, but I can remember my dad taking me to Kokomo for a high school basketball game. And back then, you didn't get tickets from the ticket office because they sold out all season tickets. You didn't even get a season ticket. You got a half of a season ticket back in the 60s or 50s, I'm sorry. So you might get to go to 6 out of the 12 games. Well, somehow we scalped a ticket, and I remember going into that enormous gymnasium at Kokomo and watching them play and thinking, my gosh, would that be fun to play or coach there? So when I get into high school, we really thought we would win the sectional and get to go to the regional, because in the regional, Deedsville would get 12 tickets maybe. And my mom, I remember taking us as 8th graders to the regional at Kokomo. And, this is Noblesville, Wabash, Kokomo, Peru, maybe. And I thought, my gosh. And the guys that went with us were some seniors. And they said, guys, when you're seniors, I bet you win the sectional, because we had won the county as 8th graders. And here we are. We're dreaming about winning a sectional, which was our dream. And never got there, but I did get there as a coach and win my first sectional in 1987 and go on and I believe we won 11 sectional tournaments at Kokomo High School.
What was the difference between your 83 Final Four team at Connorsville and then going to the Final Four with Kokomo?
Well, it was tough. In 1989, we started out the year. In 88, we only lost 2 games. 88 was probably one of the strongest years in the North Central Conference, and you could probably say that about many other years too. But in 88, Richmond was number 1 with Woody Austin. Muncie was number 2 with Chandler Thompson, and we were number 4 with our team that we had at Kokomo. So 3 of the top 4 teams in a conference were in the North Central Conference. So we played at Richmond, lost a close game. Then we go to Muncie, and if we win that game, we will win the conference because Muncie had beaten Richmond. So if we win, we're co-champions. Well, Muncie blew us out, and they went on and won the state championship, whereas we ended up 18-2 for the year, went to the finals of the semi-state, got beat by Hammond Knoll, but Muncie then went ahead and won the state championship against probably one of the finest coaching jobs I've ever seen. Bill Harrell was great friend, great coach. And that time he went up against Concord with Sean Kemp. Sean Kemp probably, if not the best, one of the best athletes that ever graduated from Indiana high schools, and beat them pretty convincingly. So we lost to 2 games during the year, Muncie, Richmond. They were both, I believe, in the semi-state, and then one of them won the state championship. So 88 was a great year. So we had 3 starters returning, and we thought, hey, we're going to have a good team. Well, it ends up we host the Hall of Fame Classic. We lose both games on our home court. One of them to South Bend St. Joe, who was outstanding, and then we lose to New Washington, a small school from southern Indiana that beat us. So at that time, here we are, a team that was predicted that we could be a state contender, and we're 4-5 at that moment. And I'm thinking, well, we didn't get this going right. Well, we changed the lineup a little, and we win 21 in a row, and we beat Pat Graham from Floyd Central in the afternoon game. But who do we see facing us but Lawrence North and Eric Montross and Todd Leary and Victor Bush. So a great high school team, and we thought we had a great chance. We had a 6'9" center that we thought that could work with Montross, but Montross was unstoppable against us, and we ended up losing.
When did the rumblings, or when did the class system start to surface? What were your thoughts about it, and what were your thoughts when they did change it to it?
Well, I guess I enjoyed it because when I'm at Connorsville and at Newcastle, they were all coming to our gymnasium. For 18 years, we hosted a sectional. And in those years, we were obviously the biggest school and the favorite. But it was always fun to see the challenge of those teams to come in and play against us, just like when I was at Deedsville, we wanted to go in and beat Peru. I was very fortunate. One of my first assistant coaches was Wayne Allen, and he coached at Northwestern High School in Howard County, fed into the Kokomo sectional, and his only dream at Northwestern was winning that Kokomo sectional. He scouted Kokomo every game. He ends up winning in 1981 and 82, winning the sectional. By the time I was there in the late 80s and 90s, teams, I don't even really think it was their goal to win the sectional. They really maybe kind of conceded that we were that good. But we had some great games against some of them. But you could see the fans of the smaller schools wanting that chance to maybe host their own sectional and win a state championship, as some other states in the United States had done in class basketball. So we started hearing it come up in the 90s, and I really didn't think it would happen. The commissioner at that time was Bob Gardner. Bob Gardner was my assistant coach in my first coaching job at West Washington. I knew him well, and I talked to him about class basketball a little bit, and, you know, he kind of seemed non-committal. But in 1997, the last single-class tournament was held, and we were fortunate to be in the Final Four at the Hoosier Dome. So a great thrill and a great way to end single-class basketball, playing in the Hoosier Dome with the 97 team.
When is it time to move on from Kokomo, and how difficult was that?
It was very difficult. You know, we loved Kokomo. All four of my children graduated from Kokomo High School. We lived there coached there for 14 years, and we had not anticipated leaving. We had won 4 of 6 regionals at Marion from 92 to 97. So we were very happy, and at that moment, class basketball was in, and you know, we were playing at Lafayette, but it was our conference games, and we knew that we could win there. But it was really a funny instance that happened in the year 2000. Bill Harrell at Muncie Central challenged the ISHAA rule that a high school basketball coach had to be a full-time teacher, because for many years the cross-country coach or the volleyball coach or the track coach might be a lay coach. And he had some lawyer that says, I don't think it can stand up that they make the basketball coach be a teacher when the others don't. So he challenged that in 2000, and ISHA, rather than to go to court, they changed the rule that year that you could coach and not be a full-time teacher. I believe you still had to have a teaching license, but you did not have to teach. So at that moment, I was 57 years old, and I couldn't draw my teacher's retirement. And so at that moment, with my teacher's retirement and coaching and maybe camp and summer school, you would make almost the same amount. I approached my principal with that idea, and he was excited about it because that would free him up for another teacher and a lower price teacher and still be able for me to coach. But the higher administration did not want their coach not to be a full-time teacher. So I was happy to go back to Connersville. In 2001, I would have had an outstanding team. I think I had 3 or 4 returning starters. So I was excited about it. Well, I'm also middle school AD, and I got a call from Lewis Cass High School. So Greg Marchand, their athletic director, called me that we had a junior high golf match, and he was going to have to change the location because of some reason. And so we talked, and I said, yeah, that's fine. We'll change it. We'll send our team to wherever. He said, by the way, while I got you on the phone, do you have any assistant coach that would be a good coach at Lewis Cass? Said, we have one opening, a business opening. And I said, well, I don't have any assistants that teach business, but I said, how would you be interested in an older coach that would coach as a lay coach? And he says, what do you mean? I said, I might be interested in talking with you. And at that moment, he said, yeah, we'd love to talk with you. And it just so happened, scouting for the regional, I had seen Lewis Cass play in 2000, and they had some outstanding players. And I thought, that wouldn't be a bad job probably. I'd still live in Kokomo. I would still make about the same salary with my teaching retirement and coach at Lewis Cass. So I went up and talked with him. The next day I was offered the job, and I became the coach at Lewis Cass High School. So that's the reason I left. I would have still been at Kokomo the next year and would have had a good team, I believe. But Lewis Cass when I go there, I know they had some good players, but the first day in practice with one of my assistants that came with me from Kokomo, Coach Wall says, "Coach, we can win the state championship." And I said, "Coach, why do you think I came here?" You know, I knew they were outstanding. So in 3 years at Lewis Cass, first 2 years, we were 59-1. We lost one game during the season in 3 years. So great talent at Lewis Cass. I didn't leave there because I applied for it. I left there because of the new rule that you could coach and not teach. And with all the videotapes we watch now and all the time we spend on scouting, it was a great advantage to be able to be a full-time coach and not be a full-time teacher, even though I did work at the school, maybe some remediation and some classes during the time, but not very many classes was I involved in. And so that was my reason for leaving for Lewis Cass. Great talent, great community for basketball, and the chance to not teach and coach. So it worked out very well for us.
So now what's the difference when you take your Lewis Cass team to the state championship from your other very successful teams?
Well, back then, now we're in class basketball, and first year we end up 19-1, and we get beat by Harding in the regional. It was a one-game regional at Harding, and they go ahead and win the state championship. So we were good. We got beat for the state champions. So the next year, we lose 4 starters, but we end up undefeated the whole year, 20-0, and we've got the T-shirts all printed, Road to Banker's Life or Conseco, whatever it was back then. We thought we were going to the state. Well, we got beat in the first game of the sectional. And so here we are, 20-0, and got beat by Taylor High School, and we're out one game in the tournament. So very disappointing. The next year, though, we do return 4 starters, and we think we've got another chance. And that year we go 20-0 again, and here's Taylor in our sectional again. And obviously in the back of everybody's mind was, I wonder how that game will go, since they did defeat us and they had their outstanding player Drew Connor returning, and we had 4 of our starters returning, and Bauer and Fry and Keller and Williams. So we knew we were going to be good, and they got beat by Sheridan. We beat Sheridan and played just very well in the state tournament. We in the 6 games, all 6 were double-digit victories, except Forest Park in the championship, and they hit a 3-pointer to cut it to 9 at the buzzer. But it was an outstanding team. You know, we always think maybe we wish we had the Tournament of Champions, because in that year we were the 7th team in the history of Indiana basketball to go undefeated as state champions. There hadn't been one since, I believe, the 85 team at Marion. And so 18 years later, we end up winning the state undefeated, and we had the chance, we hoped, to go ahead and play the champion of 3A, 1A, and 4A, but they didn't have a tournament then. And just about 6 hours later, Pike won the championship undefeated with an outstanding team with Coach Bullington. So it was great to win at both places, and the fan enthusiasm at Connorsville and Lewis Cass was very similar. We packed the gyms nearly every night. Crowds were outstanding. They followed us on our away games. Coming back from Lewis Cass for the pep station, cars started picking us up in Kokomo, about 15, 20 miles away. So we got on a fire engine, and we rode all the way from Kokomo to the gymnasium. It was an afternoon game also in 2A basketball. So we ate lunch in Indianapolis, came back for the pep station, and went into the gymnasium. And I can still remember they still played the same song, "We Are the Champions." So Queen Queen was at Connersville, and Queen was at Lewis Cass, was the great thrill of being the champions, state of Indiana.
Coach, as a Indiana Basketball Hall of Fame coach, how do you keep your energy up during all of your career? Were there any lulls where you're like, I'm a little tired, or is it just something that you have so much passion for that you keep on keeping on?
Well, my wife is in the kitchen right behind me, and I heard her snicker when you said that. There are many times that it gets very long. It all changed in the probably late in the middle 80s or whenever VHS came out. And when VHS came out, you could watch videotapes of your opponents. And I was a big proponent of that. I would drive all over the state of Indiana to get tapes against the teams that we were going to play in the tournament. And many nights I went to sleep watching video, maybe in the bedroom, and my wife would poke me and say, "Wake up, you're not done yet." And so it was long and tiring. And remember, at that moment, I'm just a coach. I'm not a teacher. So you think of the grueling job our Indiana high school coaches have right now. Brian McCauley and I worked together at Noblesville in 2018 and 2019. He taught 6 classes and still was watching videotapes like I did, and I would get to watch maybe 1 or 2 during the day as I prepared, whereas he had 6 classes he was preparing for. So the coaches now, with videotapes and the amount of scouting they do, with Huddle now that you can get, nearly every game of your opponent you can see in person on video if you want. So it's very long and hard. It's a hard job. And then I like to scout in person. So if any of the teams are playing, I'll drive to wherever. I remember this year, our first game of the season was against Smith Academy, and they played in Warsaw, I believe. It was almost 50 miles away, and it was snowing. And we're driving up there and on a Tuesday night getting ready to play them. So it didn't change anything ever. We always believed that you only could work as hard as you could, and that was as many moments as you had, spend it on basketball. So I would say most of my 24/7s in the last 40 years have been involved in basketball and whatever else time I had with my family.
Who called you, and do you still remember the phone call when you were going to be put into the Indiana Basketball Hall of Fame?
I can't remember exactly who the president was at that moment. But what a thrill. What a thrill. I mean, these are, as growing up, if you wanted to name the 6 undefeated state champions, well, you could put a Hall of Fame like Mount Rushmore of those coaches. When you think of Ray Crow, Bill Green, Bill Holtzman, John Maladette, Elmer McCall, those coaches to me were like statues that I had grew up thinking, gosh, what great coaches and what great thrills they've had. And so to be joining that group was an unbelievable. I was very fortunate. Some of my high school classmates from Deedsville came to that banquet at Primo's or wherever they have it, and were there to help me being honored as being a Hall of Fame member. And my family, unfortunately, my father had passed, but my mother was able to be there, and my children. And what a great thrill was standing up there, knowing that I was joining that great group of men as coaches of in the Hall of Fame of Indiana basketball.
Everybody who's listening to this show knows that I am a Broad Ripple Rocket homer. I mean, just I can put a team together from Broad Ripple High School that will be any team that someone comes up with. So I am a huge homer. I loved my basketball coach, Coach Bill Smith. I even loved more my athletic director, Gene Ring, who actually played for John Wooden up in South Bend in his high school days. But once I find out that you are coming to Broad Ripple to coach, I think my homerness got larger.
Well, that was a thrill. At that moment, I had retired from coaching. In 2008, I was 65 years old, I believe, and my family and I had some things we wanted to do, and I'd always wanted to go to the Maui Classic. And so I thought, gosh, I can retire from basketball 2008, go to the Maui Classic, spend my winter in Florida. So I've paid my dues. I'm going to do this exciting thing. So I do that in 2009. I'm down here in Florida. I go to the Maui Classic, see great basketball. First year for Tom Crean, I remember his first games was in the Maui Classic in 2008. But I get to do that. And so in the summertime, I'm back in Indiana, and I'm living on a lake, living the dream. And all of a sudden, I'm playing golf. And I come home from playing golf, and I'd shot probably my normal 105 or 107. And I'm sitting there watering the flowers, and I read in the newspaper that day that Broad Ripple coaching job is open. And they have 2 high school All-Americans on their team that are returning as sophomores and juniors. They both started as freshmen and sophomores. So I'm thinking, God, that would be exciting. I know I'm better coaching basketball than I am playing golf. Maybe I ought to apply for that. So it just so happens, if you were a follower, I'm not sure you ever went to a game at North Central, but if you ever went to a North Central basketball game from 86 to 2000 probably almost, if you looked in the corner of the gymnasium, there'd be this athletic director principal sitting there, and he was what I consider one of the best educator I've known, in Eugene White. And so I thought, well, I know him. He always congratulated me after the North Central game. We were very fortunate. I think we may have won our last 6 in a row against North Central, and I remind Doug Mitchell of that every time I see him. But we had a great success. So I just call Superintendent White, and I said, I would be interested in talking to you about the Broad Ripple position. He says, do you really want the job? I said, yes. He says, well, come on down tomorrow. We'll fix it up. And so I was hired on a phone call. He had seen me coach numerous times when I was at Kokomo. He wanted a state championship brought back to Indianapolis since they hadn't won, I believe, since the Broad Ripple team had won.
Correct.
And he wanted that to happen again with Broad Ripple. So I was so excited to take that job. I had a great time. Everybody asked me how Broad Ripple was. I'll say it was one of the nicest experiences of coaching that I ever had. Great players, worked very hard. And as you know, players were very appreciative. They loved basketball. That was very big to the students at Broad Ripple High School. Ron Patterson was probably one of the greatest athletes I ever coached. Stephen Jameson was on the same level as him. 2 really high school All-Americans to step into. So we thought we had a chance. We lost in that year, I believe we lost 6 games that year. 5 of them were by 1 possession. We won the city tournament, beating Howe in the championship, and just a great game. Came from 18 down in the third quarter, and Patterson hits a 3 kind of at the buzzer to win. So it was a great thrill to coach there. Of course, our sectional, we were a small school at that time because we had become a magnet school. We only had 400 to 500 students, and our sectional was the same as it is now: North Central, Warren Central, Lawrence North, Cathedral, toughest sectional in the state, probably, as it may be right now also. And we got beaten in sectional by Warren Central. So I had a great, great time. Probably if I had to do over again, I would not have left then, but it was, at that moment, it was a very trying time. Stephen Jameson, one of the maybe top 5 athletes I ever coached, had come up with colon cancer and was just drained us as a team. He passed away that summer, and I decided I was ready to retire again, and regret that I didn't go on, because they did win the sectional 2 years later, and we're very, very good high school and a very good job. And as you love Broad Ripple, so do I.
And 6 degrees of separation, you'd probably see my face up there on that 1986 undefeated team before we got beat by Jeff George and Warren Central in 1986.
Oh, I've seen that picture, and we got ours put up beside you, I believe.
Yeah.
And but we were in the next championship. I don't think there was another championship. I'm not sure, but I don't think they won the city or sectional from that team until we won in 2010. So I guess it wasn't 15 years, it was 25 years,
yeah.
And 24 years. So it was a great thrill. And Broad Ripple, I don't know what they're going to do with that building, but what a lot of great memories come out of there. Just like you say, if you want an all-star team, pretty hard to beat with George Hill as one of your players, and Jeff Robinson, and I could name them too, just like you can. Probably one of the greatest, one of my best friends at Broad Ripple. I noticed they put the Broad Ripple team for the top 10 players. I'm not sure, but Wally Cox was a great player at Broad Ripple back in my day, and I would see him at the Butler games, and he'd always encourage me, and the Rockets, keep them going, Coach. We'd like to see you cut some nets, and we were fortunate to cut the nets at Tech and win that city championship. Was a great thrill for me.
Coach, still coaching now? Any more comebacks left? Retirement? What do you do in retirement?
Well, I haven't had any calls this week yet. Being 77, you don't get a lot of calls. I was proud to coach at my high school this year at North Miami High School. And we had a team that was really a tough conference. Lost 4 or 5 ball games in the last quarter that we could have won, and maybe we were able to close to having a winning team, but didn't happen. And ends up I retire early. Had a few health problems, and that at that moment, we had never heard of this COVID-19, but I had this upper respiratory infection at that time. And so hopefully I didn't have COVID-19, but if I did, it's over with now. But I retired, and I still love to coach, but there's eventually someday you have to quit. And I think of all the coaches I coached with in the North Central Conference, Fab Alford, George Griffith, Bill Green, Bill Harrell, all the great coaches, most of them have been retired for almost 35 years now. And so I kind of outlasted all of them. And so I imagine I am retired, but you will not know that until next fall when the season starts, what Coach Mawbey is going to be doing. But I like the name Coach Mawbey, and it's been a great thrill for me to be that in that occupation. I saw a picture of the 88 All-Stars in the Facebook this week, and Brian Hogan was there. And what a great, great memories you have of all of the players that you were fortunate to coach. The Brian Reeveses, the Mike Heinemans, and Chris Heinemans, and just all the way through. I could name them all the way back maybe until, Keith Nicholson maybe at West Washington, or Chris Gray or Doug Bible at Delta. Just great thrills, great things. And better not leave out the all-time leading scorer I coached, Jeff Stackhouse, at Angola. And without him and that team, I would not be here as a Hall of Fame coach. I would not be here as a state championship coach. But for that 1978 Angola team with Carson, Selman, Wells, and Stackhouse and Clark, what a great team. And because of their great accomplishments, Coach Mawbey got to go on to Connersville and Kokomo and Cass and all the great thrills they've had.
You know, I posted that pictures of both of the girls and boys all-star teams, I think yesterday or the day before. I love doing what I do, and I will tell you this, in kind of closing, is that when I first started doing these shows, which I think you're either 188 or 189, you are on my bucket list of people that I wanted to chat with, and I think I have annoyed or bothered you for quite a few years to do this show, and we have done this show, and it is everything that I thought it would be, and I thank you for your time.
Well, I've listened to them last night. See, who did I listen to? Gosh, my memory is not as good as it should be. But, oh, yes, Irwin Cox. I listened to his yesterday because Irwin and Harold are great friends of mine from Kokomo. Irwin married one of my secretaries at McConaughey's daughter, so I knew Irwin from all those days. And the mystique of those Kokomo Wildcats back when I was a high school student, Irwin was one of them. And so I listened to his, and I'm really anticipating this afternoon listening to Coach Al Brown. Al and I go all the way back to coaching against him at DeKalb and watching his career when he's sitting next to Pat Summitt. And, you know, just the great thrills. I be anxious to listen to the Al Brown one. And yours with Mike Heineman brought many tears to my eyes. And so thanks for doing this. For us basketball fans, it's a great fix on basketball when we can't be watching or playing.
Coach, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, and thanks for honoring me to be part of this.